Hey, did you know we have a world-class flight training school right here in San Diego? Pilots can fly almost every single day. We're close to the ocean, the desert, the mountains, the international border. That's why San Diego is one of the best places to learn how to fly in the world. Learn to fly in San Diego right at Montgomery Field. Getting started is super easy. Call 858-569-1822. Learn to fly with SDFTI. You can call them today at 858-569-1822.
So, Dave, we have a really cool guest in the studio.
I know. Even if it is 86.
86 degrees in the studio? Yeah, it's at least 86 degrees in the studio.
We got Mary Davis.
Eventually we'll find the technology to cool the room down, I'm sure.
It's called Write a Check.
Mary Davis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. I consider myself an accidental activist. I'm sorry.
An accidental activist.
All the way. Okay,
An accidental activist.
What was the accident?
It's that little thing called COVID. So I started out when I saw things that just didn't really make sense. And at first, we'll admit COVID was a little scary. Like we kind of didn't know where we were going. And I attend church, and so then they told us, well, okay, you can't go to church, but you can buy liquor and a lotto ticket. And I kind of scratched my head.
Oh, and you could go to a topless bar.
Oh, and then it was you can't sing in church, but you can get a lap dance when the strippers won their suit, right?
Right.
And then really where they lost me was when the businesses started to open, maybe 6 months into it, and they said, oh no, a hot dog does not count as a meal at a bar, but it's good enough for your kid in school. And at that point, I said,
enough.
I'm done. So I started researching groups, and I work with Reopen San Diego, and I got very involved with them.
Amy Reichart, right?
Amy Reichart, 4th District, going to support her,
Endorsed by San Diego County gun owners.
She's a dynamo, and she is the real deal, and that's why I really got involved, because she's very authentic and from the heart, and she doesn't do anything or ask anything that she is not willing to do herself.
True.
So I'm a big supporter, but then so I started getting involved in going to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and because they kind of control the purse strings for the county, and as a federal dollars come flow, and I just saw a lot of things there that were very inconsistent. And that's
You're
putting
so polite.
My husband's the other half of the but anyway, so
well, they control the purse strings, but they also the health department.
Absolutely.
Which is why they had so much power during COVID.
That's exactly right. They had the power of controlling our life, and then I just saw inconsistencies. And so the more I go every time, the more I see. And at first I will be the person that I was like, tyrant, bodily autonomy, and, it's all on deaf ears. And then you got to kind of be strategic and know where to hit and everything. And so that's where I was going with that. And
How long have you been doing that?
I crept into it. And that's another thing,
So about
too.
3 years, probably.
No, not even. I mean, because my mom was ill, and then she ended up passing away, and so now I pretty much devote myself full time to this. But
He doesn't get to eat anymore.
It's frozen food for him.
Has to do his own laundry.
Yeah. Anyway, so
well, let's talk a little bit about your background. So, how much involvement in, politically? How would you have described yourself, before this happened?
I've always voted. I think it's very important, and I was a self-professed Democrat when I was young, and then as I got older and I saw things like confiscation of property and rights and wanting to shift things. Like, for example, when I was young, I always voted, a bond? Yeah, very good. And then once you realize that somebody is actually paying for that bond, and a lot of renters kind of delude themselves because they think, it won't affect, I don't pay property taxes. Well, what do you think your rent goes to? That rent increase that is coming your way is directly, in part, driven by a property tax increase. So whether you rent or own, you are going to be paying the price for that.
Wow. And so, I mean, what was your level of involvement? Did you ever help out in a campaign? Did you go to you were a Republican, though?
Then I shifted to become a Republican. And
so, did you ever go to a Republican Party meeting or anything? Like how involved you were? Sounds like you were totally uninvolved in politics.
My closest involvement was, and this is probably where I got my love of politics and things, was I got extra credit. So teachers pay attention. I had an extra credit assignment when I was 17, and my friend and I, Lynn Hansen, went down to Fashion Valley in probably 1979 and saw Ronald Reagan speak. And so that kind of was interested. And then a college professor gave us extra credit to go down to election night to Golden Hall And so from that, I was really interested. So that's why I voted. I followed politics, but I never really had a reason.
So that changes everything. You were very ingrained in the process then, it sounds like.
I was educated on the
kidding.
process, but I never got involved.
That's awesome that you did, that you stood up. Something so big as COVID. You know, it really, truly, I truly believe that everything that happened with COVID was, and I talked about this at the not the last gun prom, the gun prom prior. Even though we're a Second Amendment organization, I had to say something because it was on everybody's mind. I was having so many conversations about it. And I truly believe that everything that happened in COVID, it was the biggest thing in our generation. It was probably the biggest thing to happen since World War II, since the attack on Pearl Harbor. I think it was bigger than 9/11. I think it was bigger than Vietnam. I think it was the biggest thing to happen since World War II. When you look at how much it changed things.
It still is.
It's still changing things. It still has changed things.
I mean, it hasn't gone away.
The effect of what happened, and it was all, these were all decisions that were made. The things, the changes that I'm talking about were all decisions that were made.
Right.
You know?
And that's my issue. Whenever people will say, oh, COVID, I'm like, no, let's be very clear. It was not COVID. It was the government's response to COVID.
Right.
So let's clearly put blame and responsibility where it lies, because there were many options, and you can look at Florida and California and freedoms and businesses. And a big issue right now, another motivator for me is kids, and where California is headed and taking control of our kids and forcing indoctrination and education on them. And I kind of have this joke that the more, if you're not familiar with SEL, social emotional learning, it's how they're kind of like bringing in it's things that I don't think should be taught in school, and they use it as the leverage and the fulcrum point to get these things into school. And the irony is, the more social and SEL that's being taught in schools, the worse the mental health and emotional well-being of our kids seem to go. So, I mean, if you look at even guns and kids, I mean, there were people that would go to school with a rifle, and they would have gun training, in the 40s and 50s. And now it's like they've gotten to be so imprinted with fear that, and that's my biggest thing, is that COVID was another opportunity that we imprinted our kids with fear.
Do you think parents are going to fall in line for masking again?
Absolutely not. I follow LA, and they had a big revolt. Ferrer up there, I think she's a version of Wilma Wooten, but she was this close to imposing a mask mandate, and it was very interesting to see they got activated and motivated, and those mama bears do not want to mess. Even in LA, the mama bears are fierce.
Right. Well, mama bears are everywhere.
Yep.
You poke one, you poke them all. Yeah, so I agree with you. I just don't think, it's shame on me the first time, shame on you the second time.
Absolutely right.
Because we didn't know in the beginning, so everybody had to trust the CDC and look at Walensky. She comes right out and says, "Yeah, we sure screwed that up." But you still have a job.
Well, it was it's such an interesting. People have very selective memories. It was the Trump administration who said, "All right, this thing's serious." Meanwhile. We had Pelosi and Nathan Fletcher who were blowing this thing off, saying, this is just there's footage of Nathan Fletcher saying, hey, this is just some infection in Wuhan. This has nothing to do with California. Right. And he actually said, everybody come down to, it was like Mira Mesa area and eat it, at an Asian-themed restaurant to support them. Meanwhile, there's the Trump administration that said, hey, look, we got to take this seriously, gave guidance to the states, said, here's some suggestions, some things we're going to do for a temporary shutdown. However, don't shut these things down because they're necessary. And it was the Democrats that were pushing back. And then like a month later, it was the total opposite. They just flipped, and it was the Trump administration saying, all right, we need to start to kind of, come out of this. And Democrats flipped out, and he said, all right, fine. I'm pushing it all back on the states. And half the states opened up. And the other half, not even half. Right. Most of the other states opened up. A few of the other states didn't. This whole thing was so ridiculous. I really, truly believe that this should be a litmus test. If you're an elected official and you're looking to get reelected this year, this should be how you behaved during COVID should absolutely be a test on whether or not you get to keep your job. And I got to tell you, I think most failed. I think most failed that test.
It's easier to count the ones that passed.
It's way easier.
Way easier.
Absolutely. And, voters have short memories. And even
I
now
know.
people will, like my mother died needlessly alone in a nursing home.
See?
She'd been in the hospital just a few days before where I was allowed to stay with her 24/7. So it was a very subjective rule. I was already there gowned up. So that, this voter doesn't forget. And I hope the rest of you will wake up and not forget either.
I'm
Well,
sorry
we have
to
to
hear
keep.
about your
Yeah,
loss.
I am too. Very much so. How old was she?
She was 91. Yeah. But
She had a good life.
She had a good life and she was healthy, but she shouldn't have died alone.
No.
And I won't forget.
And that's the key. That's the key.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So how did you find Reopen originally? How did all that happen?
Probably just through a website search in the media, and I saw people that were actually trying to do something about it, and again calling out the double standards of why, and so I just kind of slowly. I was a lurker at first, and then I got more involved, and then I when they finally reopened March 15th, which ironically was my mother's birthday, I thought that was a little hug from heaven, to go to my first meeting in person, and I spoke, and every time I go, I just see more and more about how they take territory, and we can get into that in the next segment.
I want to talk about that because when you said you went to a meeting and spoke, you went to a reform meeting or you went to a county board?
The County Board of Supervisors
Yeah, so I want
to
to talk about that because that's intimidating.
It is intimidating, and I want everybody else to be brave.
Yeah, but I want to go into that because as part of the job, part of being an activist, we had to go to city council meetings. We had to, all that stuff. It's very intimidating.
You know what? This lady is really on top of it.
I'll tell you what.
No, you know what she said?
What?
Oh, well, when we come back and go to the next break.
She's watching the clock.
I have never had a guest do that.
She's
Usually
directing.
they'll just blail right on through and just keep talking. You're coming back. PRMI Mortgage. Just remember that. PrimeRes.com/Alpine. If you're looking to buy, refi, or if you're just considering a reverse mortgage, call our local mortgage guy that you can trust. Call Chris Wiley at PRMI Mortgage. For nearly 25 years, Chris has been helping local San Diegans with all their mortgage needs. They make it easy. They work with a friendly expert team that will help you get the best deal on a mortgage. Call Chris Wiley at 619-722-1303 or just go to primeres.com/Alpine. All right, we got Mary Davis back with us, and she's got a great, great story. And folks, you can learn a lot from this young lady. You can get involved and make a difference instead of working in the garden, right?
Working in the garden.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I like to say is, you get the government you tolerate. So at the end, your action or inaction
That's a T-shirt.
Yeah, I like
leads
that.
to a legacy. And what will yours be? So my big issue is I'm fighting for the kids and the next generation, and I go into the SEL. I touched on that. But the issue right now, what I see is the indoctrination and the shielding. They're trying to cut off the past for youth to get engaged and involved with guns. A lot of people are afraid of guns only because they've never been around them or been exposed to them. So by cutting off this next generation for advertising to youth or encouraging them, they are doing the same thing. I call it social engineering as to what they did with the free youth pass. If you saw that, they gave public transit free to youth. They did it under the benevolence of climate change and equity, but what they're really doing is they're training up a new generation to get used to mass transit for the next pandemic that they can shut off the minute they choose to.
Or once they get rid of all the gas cars, push us to electric, and we have no way to charge them up.
Absolutely.
So you got to get from point A to point B. They'll say, oh, I remember I used to ride the trolley.
And one of my big issues is what I say, increase redundancy, decrease dependency. So we really need to get people conditioned back to self-sufficiency. And one of the statistics that I had read on they said at the Board of Supervisors meeting was that 1 out of 3 people in the county are on some type of government assistance. And not like Medicare, this is like, they call it self-sufficiency, but benefits. And I thought they said it like it was a good thing instead of saying, no, we want that number as low as can be. Pretty soon it'll be 1 out of 2. It's not going to be sustainable.
That's their goal. See, that's the problem. When we're not really paying attention to it, we're just saying, like you said, oh, well, that sounds like a good thing. Or, oh, you're letting kids ride transit. Wow, how cool is that? But when you really dig down deep, you're absolutely correct. It's the worst thing ever.
Absolutely. And so I just really want people to wake up and get involved and to realize that you can make a difference. And I heard a really interesting from Brian Dolly at the Republican meeting a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about just even if the Christians alone would vote, how many of them there are, and that they could have actually tipped the state if they would simply just get activated and vote.
Boy, isn't that a true
Well,
statement.
so what? Okay, so we were talking about how you got involved. You found reform, and they were having a. They all went to the supervisor, county board of supervisors.
Reopened San Diego, yes. And so they started going, and they're involved with the city of San Diego, but I just felt my calling was in the board of supervisors. And again, the purse strings and the health decisions were really, and then the other big one, then the best agency you've never heard of is Sandag, which is a regional conglomerate who is deciding our whole future.
It's ridiculous. I don't understand. They should absolutely not. Sandag should not exist. Sandag is the county board of supervisors. Like, that's what the county board of supervisors is supposed to be doing. Instead, they've basically abdicated all their power and responsibility to this ridiculous, seemingly corrupt organization, Sandag. They've completely gotten rid of it.
It's terrible.
Sandag's
so
horrible.
Do they frown when you come in the door?
I think they are. I don't know.
Because that's a badge of honor. That's a badge of honor if they go,
Well, let's talk.
Geez.
So you were saying you went to the meeting, and it's very intimidating, right?
It's very intimidating the first time you're up there, and then you know they have cameras, and there's
So's
five of them, and they're
so's
out.
radio. Now look how good you are.
Well, I have a little experience in radio, but that's a whole other story. I'm a retired police dispatcher, so I had a captive audience. I did not have to worry about ratings.
Yeah.
But the big joke was I always told him where to go. So. But anyway, yeah, when you go to the meeting, I would say really go with a friend first and, build up your courage. I type up speaker notes, but honestly, I find myself a little bit over-reliant. I actually do a little better when I wing it a little bit, maybe just more of an outline. But when you're first starting, the showing up is 100%. I mean, just go and do it, and then you will start getting more and more courage each time you go.
Now, what do you think? I've noticed that a lot of people who got passionate about COVID, and got involved due to COVID, are with the Republican Party. Why? They didn't do anything to help.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
When I say Republican, I mean, and that's actually, I kind of consider myself somewhat of an independent or a moderate because I really feel like we need to hold everybody accountable, and I would be just as willing. In fact, one of the things I do is I read into the record because there's no accountability if they leave early. They just get up, and unless you happen to see it on camera or you're there in the room. So when they leave and I speak after that, I will put into the record what time so-and-so left, but I do it for both parties. So I think we need to hold everybody accountable. I really consider myself more of like a populist. For the people, if you look at the county organizational chart, the people are on top. But somehow our politicians have forgotten that or don't care.
It's interesting. So where are we at with this in particular, with COVID and the county? Is it all over?
Oh, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, because they don't want to let go of the emergency. Every time I say it's time to give back the keys to the COVID castle, but they don't because of course the ARPA and that's the American Relief Plan Act.
And they make a lot of money.
They make a lot of money. They just spent 1.1. The last meeting, August 16th, they did almost 1.1 million for vaccination encouragement for kids. And they're coming after the kids and the demographic least susceptible to COVID.
It's just insane.
So
now it's monkeypox.
So yeah, do you think how big of an issue is COVID and what happened during COVID in this November election that you've noticed?
I think COVID is starting to fade because it's unsustainable. I mean, as the virus attenuates, it becomes more transmissible, less lethal, and even the CDC. Well, when the CDC kind of starts coming around that the narrative and the house of cards is collapsing.
Right.
So at this point, then, it was monkeypox as the next scary thing. And also I find very interesting is a wastewater collection. Now you're hearing out of New York with polio.
Right.
And they know parents are going to take polio seriously.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law had polio, and he was, legally blind. He walked with a limp. He was one of the lucky ones, not an iron lung. So it's something to take seriously, but it's also something that we can combat, and we just need an informed response that puts real science, not political science, at the driving factor.
Well, they're striking while the iron's hot.
Absolutely. It's on to the next new scary
And
thing.
they were probably saying, polio would be a great one. I wouldn't even doubt if they didn't taint the water.
taint the water, and then also I wonder, like they have like focus groups, right?
Yeah.
What can we get?
What
is
can
the
we do
next
next?
thing? Yeah.
COVID doesn't get a response anymore. I think people are tired of hearing about it. Monkeypox didn't get the rise that they wanted. They had to come up with something.
No. Now they're trying to change where monkeypox originated, just like they wanted to change where COVID originated. You know, because well, that's not working. We got to come up with something better than that. I agree with you 100%. What about you, Smiley?
I heard that they wanted to actually. There was a big debate. It was a big issue on renaming monkeypox because the gorilla community was very offended. You know,
Yeah, the
felt
zoo.
like they were being
the guys at
attacked,
the zoo had a
frankly.
fit.
So
Yeah, they were throwing feces.
I honestly believe that there was a lot of sincere, interest, and I think there was a lot of sincerity on both sides. I just think that I think there was a very, very different perspective on how to handle it, and I think that it's extremely fair to say that the response was way too much, way overboard.
I think if it hadn't have gone political, if it would have stayed medical, I think we would have been better off. But the minute it flipped to political, left against the right, that's what ruined it.
So that's the consequences, because they went so overboard, and I would say power was abused. The consequences, a loss of trust. So when something else does come up,
they'll never believe it.
Yeah, it's.
Would you?
Well, I don't believe anything, Dave.
That's true. You don't.
I don't believe anything that any politician ever says to me.
Yeah, and absolutely. So, like, natural immunity was another tipping point, right? It's always been recognized. Even what everybody wants to talk, I think it's the Johnson case, like in the early 1900s, about smallpox immunization. What they never bothered to tell you was that you didn't have to be immunized if you had natural immunity. Even back in the early 1900s, they recognized natural immunity. So don't talk out of both sides of your mouth. If you want to say the vaccination's important, then so is natural immunity, just like 100 years ago when it was recognized.
Right. Yeah, see, that's it. There's just there's an agenda, and there's no honesty. However they can get to that agenda, because they just think we're stupid.
Absolutely. They drive it. And so one of the things I want to leave you guys with some tips just to do this. A big issue is redirect the vocabulary. It's one of the ways they shape the narrative. And ghost guns, it really, every time I hear it, just on the chalkboard, okay? Don't fall into it. Don't accept it.
Right.
Right? Okay, and then reclaim the narrative. When they start shifting or labeling something misinformation, push back. Look at how much they spewed out in 2021 that has now been found to be, they're the ones that perpetuate the misinformation.
And you don't even have to say what it is, because everything was misinformation, and it was all they're doing.
Right. Can't transmit,
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Awkward.
Ooh. Yep. Sort of. But I feel much better that I have it. But, I'm not dying. Well, there's people out there that are getting. My last co-host got COVID. She was sick for a couple of days, and she's fine.
Yeah, and that the whole thing about, I would have been worse if I didn't, it's called an unfalsifiable argument.
Well,
it's
of course.
like a logical fallacy. It can't be disproved.
If I'd have married somebody else, I'd be filthy rich.
That's
the truth.
What was the most surprising thing you learned through this whole thing? What was one thing where you were like, oh my gosh? Like,
So
Still being surprised.
I saw a Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan video, and it was just a minute clip, and I encourage everybody to look it up. But he talked about how they take territory, and it's just incrementally, a little bit at a time. And once I saw that, then I went, and that was probably, I saw that in April, and I went to, and now every meeting I go to, I see. So one of the ways they do it, agenda creep. They make an agenda, like let's look at item 15 on the day that they churned it from manufacturers to sellers, distributors, and marketers. They went in with one, we're going to address manufacturers, and then they went beyond
We're
that.
actually going to go into detail. I'm going to have you. We're going to talk to you in the
Yes.
next segment as well, and I want you to go into detail about that because it's very, very interesting. But keep going.
Okay, I was just going to say, so that agenda creep is one. Trojan horse, the local CDA ordinance, which was supposedly for the elimination of discrimination against women, except what they did is they presented it as UN version, and we'll talk about more.
I'm not going to be very happy when I leave here tonight.
Oh, you're always happy, man.
I know, that's true. All right.
You're in a little GTI out there today?
Yeah, that thing kicks butt.
That's got to make you happy.
Six-speed manual,
Little
30 miles per gallon.
GTI.
Yeah, I think all great. Right here. Well, attention, California residents. Gun laws are changing across the county. The recent SCOTUS ruling affirms your right to carry a concealed firearm. So now, more than ever, it's critical you know your California gun laws. That's why the U.S. Concealed Carry Association exists, to help keep responsible Americans up to date with education and training. Visit uscca.com/GOR to learn more about the California gun laws and getting your concealed carry permit. That's uscca.com/GOR for the most up-to-date California gun law information. Act now.
So you were actually, Mary, were you in the room, or were you watching when they passed the county passed the we want to sue manufacturers?
Yes,
thing?
And actually, I had a prepared speech to talk about it because he did it right at the last minute before they allowed public comment, right before the vote. And I addressed it in my public comment. I said, Nathan, you're doing it again. you're taking it farther than what was in the stated agenda. And so the Brown Act actually requires them to post the agenda 72 hours in advance for regular meetings. And then they have to, it's normally 20 words, but it has to be, the COVID item can be up to 100 or 110 words. And so they have to be specific enough to give people an idea of what's going to happen.
What did Nathan say when you said that?
Nothing. They have the poker face. Most of them are just looking down at their phones, honestly. So sometimes I feel like it's a facade where they act like they're listening to us, but we already know what decision they're going to make.
Right.
But at this point,
But you got to be there.
You've got to be there, and you've got to take every tactic to hold them accountable and hold their feet to the fire. And so when I saw them do that, I thought, nope, that wasn't on the agenda, as your supporting documents stated that was going to be manufactured.
So this was a couple months. Let's take a little bit of a step back and kind of walk people through it. So what they did is they passed an initiative to.
The item was titled "Actions to Stem the Tide of Gun Violence in Our Communities," and it's one of these like ambiguous, kind of very overly broad. And then you had to dig down and click in the agenda to the supporting documents where they talked about manufacturers. And then it was during the meeting, all of a sudden, like a vinyl record, like, oh, we're going to make a friendly amendment to throw in distributors, markers, and sellers, which was beyond the scope of what had been posted on the agenda.
Yeah, which was, so he went on this whole media tour where he talked about, and they'd call us and say, hey, what do you guys think about it? And we weighed in on it. And they did a press conference, they went on a media tour, and they talked about, hey, all we want to do is go after manufacturers who are, who are selling guns to criminals or, whatever. They kind of softened it, so they told the story to the public. And then at the last second in the meeting, they added not just gun manufacturers, but basically gun shops too, and their distributors. Added that at the very last second. Now that's not, that's substantial.
It's very substantial, and it's part of one of the tactics. So one was agenda creep, where they add the last minute. They also do the Trojan horse, where I call it a dog pill and a marshmallow, or my less kind name is turd and a taco. So where they hide something and camouflage it, right? So they start out, oh, well, man, sellers, okay, but then they just keep adding to it. So, and then they dilute our voices. For example, another thing they did was they wanted to rein in hate speech. A man called Wilma Wooten a very derogatory, pejorative name, and so they revised rules, but then it went a step further, and they took away clapping. So
they took away clapping.
You're not allowed to clap in chambers. But let me
snap. Can we snap?
Let me clarify it. You can chat. The first part, 45 minutes, is proclamations where you can openly clap for the things they want you to clap for. When it comes to the public speaking, then we're not allowed to clap. He gavels us quiet all the time. And I'm actually researching videos, and I've talked to a lawyer that I am pursuing, exploring at this point.
And that's awesome. So, but the Brown Act, which basically it's rules. It's rules for how you can conduct a meeting. The most common is what you have to do in order to present some kind of regulation or initiative or whatever. Which you're explaining. You have to put it out a certain amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. It has to do with elected officials being able to talk to each other about certain things that, unless it's in public. I mean, this is a real law. And they broke it by changing substantially this initiative that they passed.
I feel there was a violation, but then it's how. So I sent a cure and correct letter in July. You have 30 days to do that, and then either they don't respond or they can take it. So, for example, in October, when they did the vaccine mandate for new hires, somebody had sent a letter, and they ended up doing the cure and correct, and they had to revote on that at the meeting afterwards. So that's what I was hoping for with this, but they've taken the ignore tactic at that point. And so at this point, then I have a choice. I can sue them or I can move on to the First Amendment. So I'm not sure that there's enough juice in the squeeze to pursue a lawsuit for this. I feel like there's a lot better case with the clapping because it's so subjective and so that they allow it at the part of the meeting they want.
Have you've talked to an attorney?
Perhaps.
Okay. All right. We'll have to talk because I might have an attorney for you. Maybe it might be the same attorney.
Yeah, but the issue is, and I had seen an article from Ian Pryor, if you're not familiar with him, he was deeply involved with Loudoun County and all the school nonsense going there with the bathroom assaults and the cover-up. And the issue is, he said that one of the tactics that citizens now used to be afraid to take on, but no longer are, is lawfare. Because when you point out a problem to the government and you tell them that it needs to be fixed and they ignore you, people used to think twice. Now I think a lot more people are willing to engage, and there are a lot more places, like, say, the First Amendment Coalition that helped me with my Brown Act letter. They have resources, and they were great. So citizens are educated and informed, and they are no longer afraid to take on the tyrants. We are at the top of the organizational chart.
And I think that's awesome. And it's not,
Wow.
You're a very bright and motivated person, but I'm. You're not a millionaire. You know what I mean? You didn't spend a lifetime in politics. You don't have some special skills. You're just somebody that said, hey, you know what?
She was a police dispatcher.
Right, but I'm just saying.
She got lots of money.
But what I'm saying is I think that people, they think this is all too complicated. It's too hard. They don't know where to start. And I think you're a perfect example of just a concerned citizen who said, hey, you know what? This country, this county is just as much mine as it is everybody else's.
Absolutely. And, here's the thing. The Internet is a great equalizer when it comes to education. You don't need to go to Harvard and Yale, and you probably don't want your kid to do that now. The way they'll be turned and indoctrinated. So, learn and research. That's what I did, is I just started looking at the rights and what my available tools were. And then, because we have this feeling of, helplessness, we'll have to move from California to make it better. No. We're going to fight for California.
That's right.
And enough of us are going to wake up and do this, and you can do it too.
George Washington isn't famous because he fled Virginia.
Right. And one of the things that is, I don't know how close we are to closing here, but
keep going. We got you.
Okay.
We'll manage the clock. You just talk.
You'll hear music.
I wrote a beginner's guide to civic engagement
Go
and
for
activism.
It.
Okay. So
Step one.
Step one. Well, I'm going to show up my little. There's a QR code if anybody wants to see it. But I end it by saying Concord or the couch. And what I mean by that is there are days where I certainly don't want to get involved. I have better things to do than go to a meeting. But what I think about is back in Concord and Lexington, there was a Minuteman sitting there by the fire having a warm bowl of stew, and a knock came at the door. And he had a choice. There he was by the fire, boots off, feet up. He could turn for the second bowl, or he could answer the call. He could choose comfort over cause. And so at this point, we need to choose cause. This is our Concord and Lexington, and we need to answer the call.
Did you ever think you'd be doing this?
No, and it's a shame that I have to, but I'm doing it so the next generation won't have to.
And what did you say at the very beginning about the price?
The price, well, you get the government you tolerate.
You get the government you tolerate. The what's the quote? The ever vigilance, right? The price of liberty.
The price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
There it is. Eternal vigilance.
And I'm not sure that might have been one of your other guests, but it's absolutely true.
Oh, my apologies. Still, it rings true here.
It rings true for every segment because they are trying to erode, and that's why my shirt says, freedom is like the Grand Canyon, and on the back it shows an outline of America eroded. It's eroded a grain at a time. And when I go to these meetings, every single time I see that they are trying to take this right and the gun rights, they are doing it incrementally, and we've got to stand up and say enough.
Awesome job, Mary. Thank you so much.
Unbelievable.
You got a website, or where would you want people
I'm about to start a new one. It's going to be Political 911 and talking about saving California.
I like the 911 homage to your old job.
Absolutely.
That was pretty.
I didn't catch that.
You didn't catch that?
I'm not very smart.
You were yesterday. So, hey, this
Awesome.
has been another great show. Alicia, you just talk so much. I'm exhausted.
Trying to hold it in. So I just like to say really quickly, I went ahead and I clicked the link through the QR code that Mary was showing, and I've gone to the Beginner's Guide to Civic Activism, and I've got that. I've got some homework. There's 34 pages, I see. And I'd like to ask Mary, would you allow me to attend with you my first meeting?
I would love that.
Love
we
it.
could be, activist buddies, yeah.
I got a Denny's menu. I don't know what button I pushed.
Go with the Superbird.
Nothing wrong with that.
Real quick, I also have the holding them accountable. It's a transparency and teleconferencing. It's an online petition, and here is the QR code for
Another
that
one.
also. Hey, you know what? Yeah, you've got to activate the activists, right?
There you go. Awesome job.
All right. So I guess we're just about
That's
done.
it. Yeah, man. The disclosures that you always rush through, we have time for them.
Thanks for watching this clip from Gun Owners Radio. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.